maybe it'll get on sooner or later. All right, any questions from the past or current conditions? Yeah, I did that.
You did that? Was it already on?
I don't think it was. It wasn't already.
There it is. Now it's coming on.
Okay.
Takes a little bit.
All right. Any questions? Comments? Terrorist attacks. Wonder who would do that.
This one's homegrown.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's homegrown too myself, but
They think it might be tied in with those prosecutors down in Texas.
really? Would they do that?
I don't know.
What happened in Texas, or where that would happen?
No, well, there are various organized groups that do terrorism. The ones with the longest history in the United States tend to be white supremacist groups. And that's actually where the body count is. You know, Bin Laden, with only 3,000 people, that's amateur compared to Americans, essentially. So, yeah, Monday was the Boston Marathon. It's Patriots Day, which is basically the day the Boston Massacre happened, so it's a holiday in Boston, right? So the Boston Massacre, you know, Crispus Attucks, first person to die, one of the first people to die, and Black Indian and all that, you know, so patriotic, it's a holiday. So that's when they were on the Boston Marathon. The latest, because we're only like 2 days into developing this story, is that they found remnants of what was basically a pressure cooker bomb. So you take a ordinary pressure cooker, pack it with explosives. They're saying it's a kitchen. Well, this is both. So marbles, BBs, nails, broken glass, on a kitchen timer, because they didn't find a cell phone, so you can detonate them, and put it in a black duffel bag, put the duffel bag in a trash can, which then when it explodes, basically adds to the shrapnel material. Now, the technology to make that bomb was actually posted on the internet by an Al-Qaeda site years and years ago, but it was also linked to by several white supremacist sites. Right? So, who would do that? Why would Al-Qaeda necessarily bomb the Boston Marathon? Because you want to go for body count, not necessarily, you know, just 3 people and with hundreds injured. You want lots of votes, right? And why just do 2?
Well, it was on a timer though, right?
Yeah,
So
kitchen timer.
So they anticipated that being the bulk, I'm guessing, of when the runners were coming through.
Yeah, so where they timed it to blow up was basically where the bulk of runners, not the professionals, the professionals are already out
And gone.
by 2 hours, and so this went off at 4. So, you know, non-professional runners, you know, and the people running for Sandy Hook or whatever.
And
So,
charity, yeah.
yeah, and so they put it in trash cans where the crowd was watching it.
Because there were bombs that didn't go off, I heard.
No, well, they said they only found 2.
Oh,
That's the official
okay.
word,
Okay.
right? So, you know, there's, if we think about, you know, domestic terror, right? Or things that happen domestic on soil, so like, I saw this on either an email feed or Huffington Post or something like that. Some Fox News commentator said, you know, went on a whole anti-Arab rant, and so this is very similar to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the artist Michael Franti, who in one of his things talked about, yes, I remember the time in Oklahoma, you thought it was an Arab, but the whitey was a bomber, and you'd be jumping to conclusions. I think you spend your whole life watching cable in seclusion, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So, right, they were looking for Arab terrorists when it turned out to be Timothy McVeigh, white supremacist. Right? Basically, who was basically doing Oklahoma City to protest the execution of another white supremacist who had been sentenced to death because he killed cops, a Jewish cop and a black cop. So usually white supremacists don't get sentenced to death for killing people unless they're cops. So when we talk about those, so those are using that weapons of mass destruction. So this is a weapon of mass instruction, which is where I left you with, and I want to just reiterate and build upon that. The idea of the class, all right, if you're genetic products of human evolution, you have species wisdom within you. And part of that, that wisdom, if we use the African-esque phraseology, you have the wisdom of all the ancestors in your genetic line and potentially every human being who ever lived, if you attune yourself correctly and accurately to pick up on that. That is, like, it's a frequency. It's a vibe you can tune into. You can ask a question and have it answered by drawing the specific information to you. Probably not necessarily a net-based source, because the internet is not the sum of all human wisdom. It's just the sum of all that certain humans. So remember, if the planet was reduced to a village of 1,000 people, or even 100 people, proportionately, and you kept all the proportions all the same, no one would have a computer. Maybe 1 or 2% would have a cell phone. Right? So, you had to have a computer or access to computer to even get into school here. You are a minority on the planet. And certainly if you've been to other places, you can definitely see how many people have computers, but lots of people have cell phones. Particularly in places where they don't have the infrastructure that we have in the United States. Yeah. All right, so a tune is basically speaking specifically of frequencies, like vibration. So usually, in the old days before cable, when there was only 4 broadcast networks, the networks were broadcasting on specific frequencies which corresponded to the channels that you would tune, right? Just like on a radio dial, all right? So you have AM band going from 550 hertz to, or is it megahertz? No, it's hertz. 550 hertz to 1660, and then FM, so like 88.1, that's in megahertz. So frequency modulation, that's what, you know, FM means. AM, amplitude, that is how big the wave itself is. Yeah, and also in music, right? So as a guitar player, right? If you go to the central, in the Queen's chamber in the pyramid, and you strike it with a mallet, boom, it resonates at what used to be A440. Well, it's actually 438. Okay? But in order to play with other instruments, in the Western scale, you basically tune to 440 A. Middle C on a piano is 256. Those are specific frequencies, right? So that if you resonate and you sing a C note or you play a C note, we're playing the same C note, even if it's in a different octave. So to attune to a frequency, it's kind of like, if I talk about it in spiritual terms, right? In a Christian framework, if there are 3 or more of you praying in my name, I'm there too. That's attuning, right? Or in Islam, they will say, Fanafi, Muhammad, following in the footsteps of Muhammad, being like Muhammad, or whoever your favorite saint is, or person, or role model. So attuning yourself correctly and accurately. All right, so if I were basically going to take an approach, for example, the topic of conversation already today and has been basically dealing with, like gangs. Okay, so it's not that they've done criminal behavior, it's what are they trying to do after that criminal behavior? Look, Martin Luther King was thrown in jail hundreds of times for breaking the law. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Nelson Mandela was thrown in jail for 28 years. He was a lawyer and thrown in jail for let's do equality. Let's have Africans be equal in being able to vote in their own country, which was illegal. And this country supported his country in keeping him in jail. And he gets out as a criminal and becomes the first president. So what if I look at a gang member like that? You're a potential Martin Luther King or a Mandela. And I teach you to act in that way. It's not that you did something bad. Yeah, maybe you did something bad, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be permanent. Right? So I'm attuning them to a different role model. Right? Correctly and accurately. So you can't just do the outward thing, you also have to make the inward translation too. All right? So learning is a matter of exposure to unfamiliar things until they become familiar. That also means if you're uncomfortable with the unfamiliar, learning is going to be a difficult process for you until you get used to it. So I love aliens. I am xenophilic. Right? Rather than what has been promoted as the American norm, xenophobic. See, these are Greek words. Xeno means alien. Phobic means fear. Fear of aliens. I love aliens. Xenophilia. I'm fascinated. Who are those creatures? Those people? Why do they believe the way they believe? Where'd that come from? Now, I don't have to believe like they believe. I just have to understand that they believe it. And just like I might have said at the beginning of class, I don't have to believe in white supremacy because I have to treat skinheads medically. I don't have to believe what they believe. I just have to understand that they believe it.
Have you said that before?
I have.
Okay. I'm wondering why I heard that.
No, I said that last term when you were in class, but I mean, it is medically correct. I don't get to choose who my clients are. I don't get to treat people differently because whether they may agree with me politically or not. It's like I said, in terms of, look, I'm a Aramaic primacist Christian to the degree that I can be described as Christian, and some people don't think that I'm Christian because I believe that Yeshua was black, and Christianity is an African religion, and that you need to worship in the original tongue that he spoke, and nothing else. I would distrust anything coming out of Europe because historically, the European forms of that religion have been used to do genocide and slavery and all kinds of other things, and the Aramaic side hasn't done any of that stuff to this day. So I'm just saying, how many people did Jesus kill? None. How many armies did he lead? None. So why are you justifying wars in his name? No, that ain't happening.
Christian Bible advocates war.
One version of it, but notice who wrote it. Not him and his folks. So part of the piece is looking at, all right, how do we make the translation? Because Martin Luther King and the Ku Klux Klan use the exact same version of the Bible to justify what they do. How do you wrap your mind around that? Who are you going to follow? That's the idea about accurately and correctly, right? Being exposed to unfamiliar things. Like people will say, well, that nigga's crazy. He said Beethoven is black. I'm just saying Beethoven was black because white people who knew him and saw him at the time called him black. Mulatto. There is no other word in the English language that, when they describe Beethoven as mulatto and it's a white person writing it, well, I'm going to say that this white German is saying that the brother got a nice suntan. And Germany is not a tanning destination. So if I get death threats, and I have, for saying, people like Harris will be dealt with in the coming racial holy war, yeah, this is in an email and you're 16 from Junction City. Like, I'm supposed to be scared of this? He says that Beethoven is white. Yeah, I'm quoting white people. Because I was trained to believe that everything white people say is true. I'm just going to be selective in what I believe, that's all. Like a lot of people are. Right? So part of the piece here, in terms of looking at what Western civilization is, we were talking about this the other day. So Western civilization basically wants you to be educated, essentially to be xenophobic, by not teaching about what the alien's point of view is, leaving it out of the story entirely. So they're saying A, B, C, right? So that if you believe A, B, C, you don't know what comes before A. You don't know what comes after Z. You don't even think about, is there something besides abecedario, abecedario in Spanish? In logic, right, in philosophy, I challenged the logic final to get out of my math requirement for my BA. Don't try this at home, kids. I got an A on it. I got rid of my math requirement because the reason that they're teaching you math is so that you can think logically. So in logic, in philosophy, there is a proposition called A prime. So it comes before A. So let's say ABC is a logical proposition. Columbus discovered America. Let's start with A. That's A. Wait, Columbus discovered America. B, he found who? Indians, right? And what did he do with the Indians? The Indians, he said in his log, well, they didn't know about weapons. We're going to teach them about Christianity, and they could make fine slaves. C, civilization. So left out of the story, right, starting here, wait, Columbus discovered, well, discovery means that you found it first. But there are people there. Well, who are they? That's not in this frame.
Not Indians. Indians are in India.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
the purpose of the genocide of the Indians.
Yeah.
It's regional.
Yeah, well, and, as Tim talked about, that narrative. Well, why are they called Indians? Because he was looking for India. That's one narrative that's within that frame.
He's only 6,000 miles off.
But, okay, there's another narrative. ¿Te habla español?
No, poquito.
Poquito. Está bien. In Dios, in Espanol, means like God made them. Indigenous, that's actually an anglicization of that term, but yeah. In Dios meant, okay, he found these people and they're like dressed for the weather, and so they're like they're in the Garden of Eden, like Adam and Eve. They're innocent. In Dios, the way God made them, not like us, we're civilized, right? Like God made them, they, they're just like living in their canoes and their grass huts and all that other kind of stuff, and they don't know about swords like us civilized people. They don't know about warfare. That's in his framework. In Dios. Because I'll tell you for true, Columbus's Moorish navigator knew we ain't going to India. India is the other way. You go into what Africans call the circuit of the world. So we know there's land here, and we're going to reach it in 3 weeks to a month, depending on which currents we're dealing with. But so his African navigator did know that. But his African navigator is not writing in the log. So we don't hear that story. That's not in the frame.
Is it documentation of what he had on his interpretation of the situation?
Sure. Africans have been, and part of what Columbus said, and
I mean, Columbus is more.
well, no, we don't have a record necessarily of what Columbus's Moorish navigator
Well,
said.
in
There
some,
is a
in some
map.
histories of some countries, I mean.
There are, right.
No, they think this Columbus is just a crazy guy who got lost in the ocean.
Right. Right? Again, because you're from Africa, right? So you know about that framework, right? Which is not here in America.
There's an old map I forgot the name of that's like
The Ratieri
speculated-
map or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that speculated that Columbus had it was an old map that the Egyptians had, which is passed through the European lineage.
Right?
Well, the purpose of traveling for Africans, it was going to places to leave, not to stay.
Right.
So they went there before and then they left. They trade, they do some trades and they went back.
Yeah.
So he came, he was looking for the land and he found land and just settled down.
Yeah.
That's history for some people.
Yes. So for example, in Columbus's second voyage logs, where he's talking about he got some gold spear points from these Indians that he discovered, and what is the name of this? This is guanine, the 2 gold spear points, the Indians called guanine, and he goes back to Europe, meets with the King of Portugal, and the King of Portugal says, oh, guanine, wait, that's what those Indians said. And those Indians said that they got these gold spear points from these black guys who came from south across the water. And the King of Portugal told Columbus, and Columbus wrote this in his log, King of Portugal said guanine comes from Ghana. In order to weaponize the gold, you had to mix it as an alloy in a precise ratio, and that precise ratio is what we call 14 karat gold today. Copper, silver, and gold. Because 24 karat gold is too soft to make into a spear point. 24 karat gold works really well. I got a gold tooth that's 10, so it's even harder than jewelry grade gold. Right? Again, all that not in the frame. It would be A prime, but you have to educate yourself to get to A prime. To even think that there is something before A and something after Z. You have to be able to shift the frame. So, then focusing on print literacy. So again, with print literacy, before we had the internet, we had to rely on books. Is all human knowledge contained with books? No. Because we're not publishing everything that everybody knows. And people can write live, so which is why you also have to have references and sources and all that kind of stuff. Like when I talk about within your research papers, don't just give me an internet citation, give me something from a book. Hopefully that you've read. Then, spelling, grammar, syntax, that's word order. Context. What is the larger picture that this smaller story is taking place? Meaning, undertone. Not what I'm saying, but how I'm saying it. I'm a real proud American. Could be prouder. Metaphor, simile, trope, composition, style, and argument, research. So, this is all out of the Western civilization context. Also, within that, numeracy. 1, 2, 3. Natural whole numbers, not zero and negative numbers, which is the whole of the universe, right? You don't get that till you deal with algebra and advanced mathematics, right? Times tables, fractions, algebra, order of operations in algebra, PEMDAS, right? Geometry, trigonometry, calculus. And in the arts, visual, musical, the classics, of art, you know, so those are usually European, Greek, Roman, not necessarily classical Chinese, Czech classical African, classical what's, you know, indigenous to Turtle Island in terms of various native nations. That's within the frame of Western civilization, but not, okay, and also then geography and history. Like, I mean, you know, when we were in Iraq, most people couldn't find Iraq on a map. Sarah Palin talking about Russia is just right over the horizon. I can see Russia from my
backyard.
Yeah, okay, really. Yeah, what's our neighbor to the north and our neighbor to the south? Oh, well, our neighbors to the north or a neighbor to... Okay, what newspapers have you read? Well, I just read newspapers. Well, name one. Just one. You can't. That's not a good thing for a person who might be leader of the free world. So the idea of a weapon of mass instruction is to counter the limited education you receive so far. Even what I'm teaching you is limited, even though it's largely outside of the box. Now, I'm not trying to limit you, but it's already enough to blow your mind, because that's what a lot of you write. Your mind is blown. Well, that's good. That is blown, but you still have to put it together in a way that's useful. All right? So, the educational system, so if you get nothing else, the educational system is designed to stratify society by limiting or enhancing exposure to certain ideas. Okay? So it's designed to produce higher and lower. Designed to do that. When my father took an entrance exam for medical school, there was yachting jargon. Like, as a doctor, is he supposed to know about, because he was basically doing surgery and psychiatry. So what does having a yacht and knowing correct nautical jargon, you know, port side, yarboard, raise the gunsail, what does that have to do with medicine? Really? Unless you're being accustomed to being rich.
That's it.
And then you're going to be a doctor and you're going to have a yacht. But how does that help you with this patient in front of you that you're cutting on? Exactly.
It doesn't.
It doesn't, except that it acts as an exclusion.
It excludes the people they don't want in there.
Right. Okay? So for example, in yes, I am part of a Lane Community College. In our math department, you know, there are people have talked about, there's business calculus. Here and at the U of O, we offer it because the U of O offers it, but you don't really use calculus in business. It's a screening tool. So wait a minute. Are we trying to produce more numerate business people, or are we trying to screen certain people out? Just the ones that can do calculus. Huh. Why is that? And so, you know, when I talked to you earlier about Bob Moses and algebra as a civil rights issue, I mean, he's just talking about algebra and middle school kids being used to the thinking process that gets you into college. Like, think beyond the moment. To recognize you have inner resources already when the problem is coming up in your life. You just have been taught to think that you don't. Rather than the can-do attitude of Donald Trump. Not that I want to use him as a role model, but has he ever been broke or homeless? No. He inherited money from his daddy. Right? So the educational system is designed to stratify society by limiting or enhancing exposure to certain ideas. Okay? So part of how it does it is vocabulary. Like, speak English. I said onomatopoeia. Speak English. That was English. It basically is a long word that says, you know, a word sounds like what it is, like pop or clap. That's onomatopoeia. Long way of saying that. Neurotransmitter. So words, thoughts, concepts, and so vocabulary and literacy. So literacy isn't just being able to read and understand vocabulary. It's also being able to read situations and people. So geography and language, where things and people are and their importance to you. So it's nice to know about the capital of Andorra, and where Andorra is. But how does that have to do with America? What about the Central African Republic? What about the Congo? What about Africa in general? Those of you with cell phones and computers, you could not have those cell phones and computers without Africans working for pennies on the day in a 12-hour day mining minerals that make critical components of the cell phone that you may pay $200 to $400 for.
And the batteries for the electric cars.
And the batteries for the electric cars, et cetera, et cetera. Those are usually when, and I don't see one here, but as an example, the aluminum pop cans, like where'd the aluminum come from?
With
Jamaica.
Jamaica. From bauxite. Right? How much do you think a Jamaican bauxite miner is making relative to so that you can have $1 pop?
Not $1.
Not $1. Right. Okay, so thinking about those interrelationships, that geography. Why do we go to Iraq? And we're not getting the oil? Huh. Why were we there exactly? Oh, because Bin Laden was there? Oh.
no, it's the rich people can make more money.
All right. So, if people from foreign countries come here and you don't know about them or where they came from, they can't be significant to you. If they confine you to a ghetto, you never think about the globe. I was having a conversation with a couple of our staff people from Mexico. So they're staff people at Lane Community College. Right? So if you understand, in order to get a job at Lane Community College, you have to have a college degree from an American institution. Now, if you were Swiss, you wouldn't have that problem. If you were from Europe, you wouldn't have that problem. Because we were talking about accents. Right? People making assumptions about your intelligence because of your accent. Like, okay. Right, so people think because you're from an Asian country or from a Latin American country, your accent means, do you understand? You have to talk loud like to people like that, but you don't do that with a German? So, yeah, and that's how people get treated here. And so, I've had, I have an urban bias, right? So, in cities, we don't make a big deal about somebody's accent, because that, seemed hick to do that. You're just supposed to understand it in a city. I made a presentation to the Board of Education here saying, look, I have to understand 16 different types of accented English, and that's just white people. So you think I'm going to discriminate against somebody because they have a Brooklyn accent, or a Boston accent, or Louisiana accent? Should I discriminate because they come from Russia? They speak English with a Russian accent, or a German accent, or a Scottish? Which accents are cool? Just tell me up front. Which accents are cool, and which accents are not? That's a trap. Okay? Because it's illegal. Shouldn't be a factor. Oh, students wouldn't be able to understand her accent. She's like Czech. Her accent is like Eastern European and it's really light. You only hear it on certain words. I think students can understand her fine. Maybe you don't understand from Marcola. I mean, I'm not picking on Marcola in particular, but I'm just making an illustration here. What's normal, right? So if you don't know about them in terms of geography, can they be significant to you? How do you think about them? You can't feel their anguish if you can't speak their language. So, for example, knowing the difference between Sunni and Shia in Islam. Yeah, like, there's some basic things with geography. What is the difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims? Okay, that's a difficult one. Why was there a beef between Protestant and Catholics leading to the long-standing wars in Ireland? Basically, it's the same thing. Similar, but not identical. I mean, I can explain the difference if you want to know.
I do.
Okay.
Actually.
Okay, so Islam means to submit to the will of Allah. A Muslim is one who submits to the will of Allah, right? There's various barriers to doing that, like your ego. In Islam, they refer to that as nafs, and there's like 7 different kinds of nafs that keep you from submitting. Like, yeah, I'm really high and holy, and you are a slob. Okay? Because you don't know how to practice right. Let me teach you. That's a form of nafs. They keep, you think you're all that? Oh, that's it. Right? So, submitting to the will of Allah. So, difference between Sunni and Shia is the belief in the veracity of different parts of the caliphate. So, a caliph is a leader, some of whom have a blood relationship to the prophet, peace be unto him. That's Shia. Okay? So they're down with the people who are blood relatives of the prophet. The Sunnis say, look, it doesn't have to be a blood relative. You just need to be able to practice Fanafi. Right? So that difference causes beef, basically. I mean, there's more to it. There's a bunch of history in there, too.
It's basically that.
Yeah.
The relative religion of Muhammad.
Yeah. Pretty much. Right? So that's why when I was talking about that whole meme thing about Barack Hussein Obama, why do you name somebody Hussein? Well, Hussein was a grandson of the prophet who was victorious in battle and was on the way to the peace negotiation when he got ambushed by the other side and killed. So then that ensued a whole 80 years war where they won finally. And so Hussein became the image of a person who fights against oppression. That's a good role model. That's why we name our kid after him. Boom, that's where that came from. Again, blood relative. Right? There's a very Asian African thing where royalty is conferred on your ability to bring other people together and make peace. And it's considered a spiritual thing that can be passed on through the blood. That's where this basically came from, because this is essentially an African religion, just like Judaism was and Christianity was. They're cousins, because they all revered the patriarch Abraham. So they call him different names. Just like they call Yeshua, Jesus, Isa. That's the name his mama gave him.
Sounds like Joshua.
Yes,
Is that
it's
spelled
very
like
similar.
What Christian Arab, they use Yeshua, they use Yesu,
Right.
Yeshua.
Yeah.
They don't use Isa. Most of them use Isa.
Right.
Christian Arab use Yeshua,
Yeah.
which
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
So I mean, so this is basically related to geography and the history of a place. All right. So knowing the difference between Sunni and Shia, like most Americans don't know that. it's learnable. I mean, you could look it up on Wikipedia if you wanted to. Not that that's a great source. Ask a Muslim. I had a Jordanian student give me a copy of the Quran. You know, the Ali, you know, he's Saudi translation. Great commentary for what it is. It's not the only version, naturally. But, so, the Eastern Orthodox Church in Christianity. The difference between Protestant and Catholic and Mormon Christians, not let alone Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, etc., etc. Like, what are the differences between all those? Oh, let's see. Let's go with Buddhists. Shinto religion, which is not Buddhist, is more Taoist. Mahayana and Hinayana Buddhists. All the sects within Hindus. Urdu, that's a language group. Hindi is a language group. Sikhs. Where they come from? How they can be confused? Why it's like ridiculous? No, Sikhs, first of all, if you know anything about their history, to confuse them with Muslims is really, I'm sorry, I'm going to be derogatory, redneck and racist and stupid. First of all, their history, they fought against Muslims when Muslims were converting people by the sword in India.
So that's Pakistan.
Right. Pakistan and India were like the same country under British occupation, and so when they fought and won against the British, the Muslims say, okay, we want our own country. Well, wait. So that became Pakistan, and the rest became India. Now, and they still have beef. Kashmir, over Kashmir. Again, this is why it pays to know geography and history, etc. So ethnic studies teaches you that. You may get some of this in geography, but geography is about the land, maps, some culture.
Well, it's physical geography too.
Physical geography, right? There's physical geography, cultural geography. So I'm teaching it to you because how does this relate to you? Right? Most Muslims are not coming here to be terrorist cells for Al-Qaeda. They're not down with that. They're doing something else. Ahmed.
One interesting thing is that in Aramaic, apparently the word for God is Allah, which I found that really fascinating. You know, Allah, you know, like learning the origin of the words, you know, maybe, you know, because like in the fact that Islam is an older religion than the Prophet Muhammad, that's just the most recent saint, so it could all easily tie back a long time ago to the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, even doing word study. Excuse me.
At a current moment?
Huh?
At a current moment?
Yes. I think I broke this down once, but. In Aramaic, sacred unity. The one before whom there are no others. This is Aramaic. La, the nothingness. Lat, the manifest. Now, Allah is supposed to be neutral for gender. But the Kaaba in Makkah, in old Egypt, Ka was the soul, Ba was the body. Soul was invisible, body was visible. At the Kaaba, worship worship of the moon goddess Alat occurred before, and whose symbol were crescent moon and the star. Moon goes through changes. Goes invisible, becomes visible. It's full. Diminishes. So here's what happens then. On the Kaaba, the 99 names of the goddess were written. Patriarch Abraham comes and says, okay, we ain't doing no 99 names of the goddess no more. So he erases them. And then now we have in Islam the wazifas, which are the 99 beautiful names of Allah. Most grace, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah, most merciful and compassionate. Astaghfirullah, the forgiveness of God. Jamal, the strong. Jamil, the beautiful. Etc., etc. So, hidden history. Right? Differences that make a difference. So, talking about something more basic, you've been to a zoo? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you know? Can you locate where the animals are from? Here's why I bring this up. In working with gang-related youth who are focused on their particular hood, a lot of times they've never been to a zoo.
Not surprising.
In the same city.
Some of them have to stay out of their hood. Alone
So-
to a zoo.
Part of the idea of exposing people to differences is then how do you utilize those differences? What do you do with that information? All right? So not only can you locate where the animals are from, can you place them in their ecological niche or identify their belt? Yeah, I know. This is about exposure to, okay, you understand what an ecological niche is, right? Right? Things are predators, some things are prey, some things are symbiotic, some things are in competition. An Umwelt is a German word. We get it from same culture that gives us Gestalt. Gestalt is your total experience. An Umwelt is an organism's worldview based on its ecological niche. So it's not enough.
The W is. The W is
In
like-
German, the W is pronounced like a V, just like Hawaii. Hawaii Umwelt. Your worldview, essentially, right? Based on your ecological niche. So, for example, the Umwelt of a dog. Dogs can't see color, they're colorblind. But they could smell 16 different million smells. That's how sensitive their sense of smell is. So what does that do to your worldview? Okay? A dolphin, and think of an orca whale as just a big dolphin, because essentially they are. So they're a top predator, but they're a dolphin. And just like other dolphins, their physiology and their ecological niche, okay, I'm a top predator, they can see, their eyesight is not very good because below 100 feet you can't see anything in the ocean anyway. because the light filters out. Even though they do hunting inshore and stuff like that. So they can see with their sonar, they can do two different frequencies. So some bounces off the surface and some penetrates you. So they can use that sound to essentially make a sonogram of you.
That's great.
Okay? So they can not only see what you had for lunch, they can see your organs. They can see whether a woman is pregnant, whether she's on her period, whatever, in the water.
That's very good.
Okay? Their skin is so sensitive that if you had the same sensitivity of their skin on you, that'd be like having a tongue for a skin. Well, no, but think of the ecological advantage of being able to taste the water. And also having your skin be able to shift shape to go faster in the water. Highly sensitive. So what would their worldview be? So, a dolphin, therefore an orca, their brains are bigger than humans, and it's not that they're bigger than humans, because that's what humans think our claim to fame is. We got big brains. Dolphins' brains are bigger, but it's not that they're bigger, it's where they're bigger that's important. Their brains are bigger in abstract thought and language production, and their brains are bigger in sound production and imaging, right? Because that's what they have to do. They don't have hands, so their culture is not going to be based on tool making. Their culture will be based on exchanging sound images, which they could do. And they have enough processing power so that they're essentially thinking creatures. Okay? They're not animals, they're sentient beings. So I think and they're mammals, right? Not fish. They eat fish and other mammals. And they also hunt great white sharks. I mean, think, everybody's afraid of great white sharks. Orcas hunt great white sharks.
Yeah, but those great white sharks have function too.
Yeah.
Not
It's
as
the process,
functional.
it's the process of hunting the white shark. It's not easy because the orca, they know now that you can have a dead spot in the shark. No
Right.
one knows that.
Right.
So even humans, they don't know that. Only true orcas.
Right.
When you turn the shark, you cannot do anything which way on his on the back. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So it was in Pacific Ocean. One attack now to that, I mean, like, there's also, I mean, why sharks are not that much in the Pacific Ocean. Because when the white shark died, he has like cells that in the water, and the white shark, another white shark can smell it and can see it's not a good place. So it's true with orca. We know that situation with white shark.
Yeah. Orcas eat white shark. They don't eat the whole shark. They just go for the liver, high in vitamin A, because they can see it. Chomp. Kills the shark. Not instantly, but
Slowly.
yeah.